If you want to learn to make better sprites for your game faster, then this video is for you. I've been using Krita for over 7 years to make my game assets for my games, and I've learned a ton of different tricks over the years to save a lot of time and make better quality assets. And in this video I'm sharing all of my best tricks that you can start using right away to save hundreds of hours over your next few projects. Let's first talk a little bit about the tools I use to draw my game assets, my sprites. The first one you cannot actually see, it doesn't quite reach the camera. No, it does barely. It's a Logitech mouse. And this is pretty much all I use for drawing. I also do have a Wacom drawing tablet, but I find myself not using it too much. I did use it previously a lot. It works great, it's a fantastic tablet, and I have the medium sized. It was fairly priced and very well functioning. But honestly, with my style of sprites I'm making at the moment, I just find that mouse is plenty enough. If I was doing something more painterly, then I might be using the tablet more. But with how long I've been just drawing and how basically my laziness got me to just switch to the mouse, and with enough time with the mouse, drawing with it just became pretty natural to me. So you definitely don't need a tablet. You might just become like me, end up not using it after a while. The other thing I use is currently a Elgato Stream Deck, and it's really fantastic. I really like it. I have a few controls for Krita. They are mostly stuff like, well, it's mostly just animation controls. I have stuff for adding new keyframes and copying and pasting keyframes in the animation view in Krita, as well as controls for moving between the keyframes and selecting different layers. Just learning the shortcuts on the keyboard is honestly easier because it's faster to type the shortcuts than to reach for the Stream Deck and to like see which button was it for whatever I need to do, if that makes any sense. Then for the Krita configuration, there are plugins you can add to Krita. I have this plugin for exporting sprite sheets. I also have one for exporting to Spine, but I don't really use Spine for my projects at the moment, so I don't use that. But this is really useful if you have a game with like frame-based animation. Then the export to Spine basically, or export to sprite sheet basically makes it so that you can just animate it in Krita, and then you can export a very clean looking sprite sheet with a grid of sprites, which is then super easy to basically import to Unity and configure the animations in Unity. And it's from this, I think it's this one, not sure, this seems to do the same thing at least, but I'm pretty sure it's this one. So you can find it in the link in the description as well. Now first, before we get into some of the tricks that I have learned, let's just cover quickly like basic navigation in Krita. So you can pan the canvas by clicking on the middle mouse button and dragging. You can also press space and drag with the left mouse button. Find whichever control scheme like works best for you. I think I usually do drag with the middle mouse button, because space didn't feel very familiar when I tried. Another thing you can do is when you press Ctrl and space, and you can zoom in and out with the left mouse button. This is a useful way to zoom very fast, very far. The control wheel is also useful, but I think this is sometimes maybe a little easier to do. You don't have to strain your middle finger. Now this is super useful. You can rotate the camera if you press shift and the space bar and then drag with the left mouse button. It's sometimes really much easier to draw some angles when your canvas is rotated. You know, some lines, some curves are much easier to draw than others. So you want the canvas to do the work for you. You don't want to like draw the angles you don't want to draw. So make sure the canvas is in a position where it's like easy to draw the lines. Like for me, For me, this is a pretty natural angle to draw, you know, a 30-degree angle. So I just rotate the canvas so that I can always be drawing 30-degree angles. That way also, you'll get really good at drawing a straight line in one angle. Then you can draw any straight line by just rotating the canvas for you. Now let's get to actual workflows. First, let's talk a little bit about like brush and drawing and erasing, stuff like that. You can see I have this brush icon on my screen, and by holding shift and dragging, you can change its size. Yeah, it's dragging to the sides, changes the size of the brush. And if I press E, I can turn on the eraser mode. Other brush tools are if you press B, you get the brush tool. If you press F, you get the fill tool. And we also have like line and circle tools. With the circle tools, the important thing to note is that if you press shift, it stays perfect circle. If you press Ctrl, it stays centered. If you press Alt, I think it's anchored in the corner. So So if you make an oval, then press Ctrl and Alt, you can rotate the oval. Yeah, that's one that took me a while to learn, and it's been useful sometimes. So those are pretty much it, and most like different combinations of these shortcuts also do something. So just play around and you'll figure out how to make anything you want. Same applies for the square tool as well. There are many useful buttons for that. Yeah, if you press just Alt, you can also move them without changing the shape. So, like, if you use those a lot, getting comfortable with the different keys can save you also a lot of time and speed up your workflows. And the final thing is the color picker. If you press Ctrl, you can pick any color in the scene just by clicking on it. Super useful. Now, the next important part is the layers. When you draw on one layer, the other layers are not affected. This way, you can make changes without like messing up other stuff in the other layers. You can press the Insert key to add a new layer. You can press Delete to delete everything in a layer. And if you press Shift and Delete, you delete the layer itself. The main purpose of layers is to separate your, for example, line art from your colors and your shading and your effects. But layers have other super powerful features as well. So say you draw some line art and it's looking very nice. It's very abstract, but it's very nice. I like it a lot. And you want to fill it in. You can select the fill tool. You may have to make sure this is the wrong tool, fill tool. And to make sure that it doesn't overlap with the lines, you create a new layer, put it under the lines so that the lines are clean. And you can fill the layers like that. If you make sure that you have some growth for padding, then the fill can actually be pretty good, because without the growth, you can see that it doesn't quite actually reach the lines. Even now, you can see that there is some space left between the lines and the color. So that's one way you can use the fill tool. Another way is to basically use the selection tools to basically select around everything you drew. By default, the selection won't be perfect, so you can either increase the growth again so that it overlaps with the lines, or you can basically right-click, transform grow selection. For me, this is binded to Ctrl Shift and G for grow, Ctrl Shift and S for shrink. So now you can see we can paint around it, but you can also, if you have one of the selection tools selected, you can transform invert selection. somewhere. I don't know where it actually is. Oh, I think it's like right here. Yeah, I don't ever use this. For me, it's Ctrl Shift and I. So now I can just color in everything. So that's basically the workflow I use to color all of my sprites. The next tools for layers are when you draw stuff with layers and you want to make some changes, which happens all the time. It's the thing you do always. For example, I want to change the color, but I don't want to change where the color is. Then you can just select your new color and you can select the alpha lock. Now when you paint, the alpha doesn't change. Basically the transparency stays the same. If you have something where there's like non-binary transparency, so it's not just either there's color or there's no color, but there's actually areas with real transparency, then painting over those will still keep the transparency the same. So that's an excellent feature that you should definitely be aware of for your sprite art. The next one is basically, let's say we want to draw some shading. We want to draw shadows for this character. Now, we could just be very accurate and make sure that the shadows don't actually overlap the lines. But I didn't really pay attention in art class, so I cannot draw within the lines. But that's fine, because I can just draw over the lines and let the computers handle the rest. So now I can select the inherit alpha to on, and that basically does it so that it only applies the layer to pixels where there's something under it. Or, well, maybe more accurately, it actually only applies the pixels to the amount of alpha there. So I'm drawing in white, but it's applying the purple color. So it's similar to the alpha lock, but instead of locking the alpha, it inherits it from the layers. Now the problem here is that when we have a background, now the alpha is inherited from the background as well. Luckily we have a fix for that. If we select all of our layers, we can press Ctrl G to create a group. And now the alpha inheritance only applies to the layers within the group. And you can drag stuff within the group and outside the group, and then the groups are changed easily like that. Now we can take a look at some other tricks to make stuff look better. Instead of using just picking manually a color for every shadow you have, I like to use a grayish bluish color for my shadows. Now this doesn't exactly look like a shadow right now, but if we change the layer mode, the blend mode of the layer to multiply, you can see that it looks much more shadowy. The layer modes are basically mathematical formulas for how to blend the different layers. They all have their mathematical formulas for how they are represented, and multiplier basically just multiplies all of the R, G, and B values of the multiply layer and all of the layers below that. And you can think of the multiply layer as a way to darken things. It can never make things lighter, it can only make things darker. And if you have a color in the multiply layer, then it basically filters the colors underneath by that color. And the darker your color is that you're multiplying with, or the stronger the filter. So if you want a very light shadow, you can use very light values. If you want a darker shadow, you can use darker grays. And the more blue the shading is, the more stronger of the filter is kind of for the blue. Or rather, the more blue it will let pass. And if you don't want blue shadows, you can just use gray for your multiply, but I find the shadows usually look a little better with some blue in it. Now, if you never used layers before and groups, you can think of them first of all as organizational tools. You can organize different aspects, but also if this is your character in one group, you can also have a second group for a weapon for your character. And stuff like that can make it much easier to move things around and make changes as you need to. You should also get familiar with the tool options for the tools you use. If, for example, you're trying to fill in a color, but it's getting stuck in the layers, you can basically select which layers it uses to make the selection from. So if I want to select the whole sword, but now it's selecting just the colors in the whole image, I can just change it to select only stuff within the current layer that is active. And then it can be much easier to color in the areas you want. Now, since the sword and the sprite beneath are in different groups, now it's super easy to just select the group, select the transform layer or selection tool and move it around or rotate it. For scaling and rotating, you just have to be mindful that it's gonna apply some blur. Since the images are pixelated, there's no way to perfectly transform the image without adding any blur. And if you do that too many times, your image can get very blurry, unfortunately. And usually at the amount of pixels I use, even just one transformation makes the sprites look already like considerably worse. Now that you have your sprite in one layer and the sword in another layer, you can use this transform tool to rotate and move it around, as well as scale it up and whatever you want. You just have to be mindful of the fact that the moment you rotate it or scale it, it will become a little blurry, which usually makes it look worse. Other tools for layers is basically the duplicate. For me, it's Ctrl-J to duplicate a group or a layer. And there's also Ctrl-E to merge a group. So basically, after merging a group, it becomes a single paint layer. You can see there's no longer a group in there. There are really good applications for this. For example, if I have my sword and I want to make it glow, I can just select the sword group, duplicate it, merge it. Now it's a single paint layer. Then I want to go to filter, blur, and select the blur. Then I can blur the sword, and I can apply a alpha lock to apply a color. Now it's glowing, but I want it under the sword, so it's glowing around it. Now it's glowing. If the glow is too weak, you can duplicate it, and if you have the two layers, you can Ctrl-E to merge the layers as well. This way you have just one layer of a stronger glow. You can also change the opacity of the layer to make the glow any strength you want. Now next we can look at some other transform features. The transform tool, this one is for moving. It might have some other features, but I think the best part about it is that it's like pixel perfect moving. You can move one pixel at a time. I mean, you can also in this one, so I don't know what this is. But this one allows you to also move selections and layers. So if you select, you can move just many layers at one time. With this tool, you cannot do that. So maybe that's the only advantage. Some things you can do with this is to scale things up. If you press Alt and drag from the edges, you can keep the other kind of edge locked. That can be super useful. You can move the pivots. If you move that, then it's rotating around the pivot. That is also very useful often. And then there are other transform tools as well. Well, you can of course scale. You can move the pivot and scale around the pivot. you can right click and you have a bunch of different tools. For example, perspective tool. This can be used to change perspective of things. You can also use it just to scale things up in different ways. Like you don't have to use it just for perspective. You can also just change the shape of things, but the way it scales things is like how perspective works. Then there's warp, cage, and mesh. They are also very nice for specific things, but liquify might be the one I use the most. And oops, let's undo the selection. If you have a selection, you can remove it by pressing Ctrl Shift and A. Oops, Ctrl Shift and A, and then we can continue with liquify. So liquify is what it sounds like. It liquefies things. Now liquify is very bad for your outlines. It makes them super thick very easily. So the way I actually use liquify is a bit, it's a lot of work, but it works. It's a lot of work, but it works. Yes. I basically make the changes I want to make, and then I just create a new layer and redo the outlines. I don't know of a better way, but it's easy way to change the shape, and it keeps your lines perfect. And for redoing the outlines, you might want to change the opacity of the thing you're drawing to lower. That way it's easier to see where the lines are at. That's kind of the idea. Here you can also mirror and rotate things. The thing about the 90-degree rotation is that it doesn't actually make things blurry, unlike the pixel by pixel rotation. You can also try the other filter modes for rotating and scaling. They're just different mathematical functions for doing the operation, and they have basically, they operate in different ways, so some of them might be better for your use case. For example, if you have pixel art where you don't want any like transparency, basically any anti-aliasing, you can select nearest neighbor. It will become kind of messy, but at least it's not blurry, if that's any use. But other than that, the different functions basically have different levels of blur, and some of them might be better for some applications. Now you can see we have some mess here from the outlines. Easy way to delete that is to pick some selection tool, draw around it, then Ctrl Shift I for the invert, and then delete. That's a thing that's good to know. If you want to draw symmetrically, you can click these, and you can then draw with perfect symmetry, and you can even move these, so you can decide where is it going to be symmetrical at. The different selection tools are useful, and it would be good to learn shortcuts for them. I don't quite remember all of them, and I don't really use the shortcuts, but I should start using them. The magic selection tool is super useful, and the magic color selection tool is also really good. So those are the ones I would maybe get the most familiar with out of these. I mean, of course, with the other ones as well, the freehand and these ones are also useful as well. For the selections, a really useful thing is if you hold Shift, you can select multiple areas and keep the selection, because if you click once, you just override it. But as long as you're holding Shift, you can select multiple. And if you select something and you want to remove selections from it, you can press Alt. And the threshold values can be useful if you're trying to select things with similar colors. You can basically make it more or less accurate. So the pressing Alt basically makes it so that you can remove a part of a selection from the selection. Now the final things, I guess I should have told earlier, but you can select brushes from here. I use mostly these round brushes. for drawing and painting, and some of these effect brushes if I want some grit into my sprites, some texture. The grids and guides can be also useful for making sure everything is in scale. You can change the size here, and you can add some offset also if you need to. There are a couple of different color selectors. The advanced one is really good, I like it. And the specific one is also good sometimes when you need to make some very specific adjustments for some reason. And for making other textures for games as well, you might need to do stuff with that. In the settings tab, you can find in the Dockers, you can find a lot of the other tools you might want to use. There's a ton of them, and most of them I have not used. In the filters, there are also a bunch of useful tools if you need to adjust things. The curves are nice for making changes to the color values of your sprites. And the blur ones can also be used a lot, but most of them I also don't really use like day to day. Now the last thing is to export your sprite into your game. If you deselect or disable any layers, they won't be exported. It basically exports your sprite the way it looks. But if you want your sword to be exported separately, you can just disable it. Or if you're in Unity, you can just make sure that there's enough space between the sprites, and then you can split them in Unity in the sprite editor. If there's too much space in between, or like extra space, you can make a selection, and you can click trim to selection. You can also just select two corner selections and then trim, and it will like fit the area you selected. That's easy way to make also more space in your canvas if you need more space to move things around. There's also good options in the layer settings or image settings for scaling the whole image or resizing canvas. The canvas resize basically makes your canvas bigger, and the resize canvas does the same thing, but the scale image to new size does the same thing, but it also scales up all of your layers in your scene. And to export your sprite, you can just go to File, Export, select your export location, select the file type for your image. For games, I used mostly PNGs, and then you can just hit export, and then you can get the image for your game asset. Now there's a lot of animation stuff also to cover, but if you guys are interested, I can make a new video for that later. I do some sprite animation for my game, but I think I'm gonna transition into more movement-based animations. Sprite animation takes a lot of time, and I honestly don't find it that appealing with my skill level anyway. So yeah, I hope you found the video useful. If you did, make sure to join my game dev group down in the link in the description. I'll see you there.